Star Trek fans, they've gathered at Cape Canaveral, that's right, in Florida, for a space mission of a very different kind, Jane.
Yeah, well, a rocket is on its way to the moon, but it's not just any old rocket. This one is carrying the ashes of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry and the original cast members.
5, 4, 3, we have ignition. And liftoff of the first United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket, launching a new era in spaceflight to the moon and beyond.
With all the details, we're joined now by Australia's favourite scientist, Dr. Karl. Good morning, Dr. Karl.
Dr. Jane, good morning.
Tell us about this launch. What makes this one different?
Firstly, it's got a heavier payload, and secondly, it's just gone bang.
Okay, what do you mean by that? That does not sound good.
It does not sound good. They've released a press release with the word critical in it.
Oh.
Right.
You don't like the word critical.
No.
So it's a very heavy rocket. It's the first launch of a new type of rocket that the Americans have been making. So it's an alternative to the SpaceX. Not fully renewable, but it can carry heavier payloads into low Earth orbit, a couple of 100 kilometres out. Geostationary, where you have the satellites, the weather satellites. And it can also do trans-lunar injection. So over a period of about an hour, it got itself going. So the side rockets burnt for 2 minutes, that was fine. Then the main first stage burnt for 5 minutes, that was perfectly fine. And then 10 seconds later, the second stage burnt for 10 minutes, that was perfectly fine. Put itself into low Earth orbit, had to think about everything. And then half an hour later, launched the third rocket to start it going towards the moon. So at the 1 hour mark, it's on the way to the moon. Everything is fine. And at the 7 hour mark, something goes wrong.
Well, there goes the ashes.
And so what happened was that you've got the rocket heading to, you've got this Peregrine launcher. So this is something that is now heading towards the moon, and its job is to head towards the moon and then slow down and put itself into an orbit around the moon, and then, once it's achieved that, gently land on the surface of the moon, right? So at the 7 hour mark, it suddenly wasn't able to keep on pointing its solar panels towards the sun. They thought, this is odd, because it's running on, it's going to be taking 40 days or so to get to the moon. So the solar panels weren't pointing, so they thought, this is weird. So they burned a little tiny bit of fuel to align itself, and then they suddenly realised that they had, the phrase is, critical loss of propellant. So we don't know what that means, and they're also saying things like, we cannot do the primary mission. The primary mission is to go into orbit around the moon and then land on the moon. And we can do the secondary mission, and at this stage, where we don't know what's happening.
So do we know where it is?
Yeah, oh yeah, it's maybe 1/30th of the way between us and the moon.
Right.
It's not going there directly, because that would burn up too much fuel. It's doing a long, complicated orbit.
I dare say it's not ideal, Dr. Karl. So, but in terms of the plan, there were ashes on board.
Yeah.
Whose ashes?
Yeah, I came across a new word. Now, I'd never heard this. I was having, and the word is a shortening of cremated remains. And here's a word you can drop into conversation: cremains.
Oh, cremains.
The cremains. You can have your cremains, if you pay enough money, in orbit or on the moon. And so there's several of the people from the original Star Trek and series, actors and writers, whose cremains are on. Well,
they were.
They're on the way
somewhere
to the moon, but they might go past it. At this stage, we don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Okay. My brain is still thinking about this, Dr. Karl, in case you can't tell. So United Launch Alliance is the company behind this rocket. They were meant to be like a serious competitor to SpaceX. Does this mean they're not anymore?
Oh, yeah, they are. So United Alliance are a mixture of Boeing and Lockheed Martin.
Well, not a good week for Boeing.
Oh dear, poor Boeing, and the 4 bolts that went missing off the. We can talk about that another time.
Yes.
Anyway, so they've come up with a new heavy rocket, and this was their first launch of it. And the rocket itself, the first stage, the boosters, and the first stage, that worked fine. And the second stage, to insert itself into low Earth orbit, that worked fine. In low Earth orbit, it should then be able to kick out and launch 12 tonnes towards the moon, and in this case it was a much lighter load, and it did successfully launch it towards the moon. So it's the separate stage built by somebody else that is the problem. So the first couple of stages to get you into orbit and head you towards the moon, they're fine. It's the other people, you can blame them for not getting their job right.
And so the ashes are now just
They're in
around.
a capsule. It's weird. There's 5 NASA experiments and about 15 private things, including You can have your photo on the moon besides your cremains, and you can have your stories. There's about 15 private experiments. So this is the first private launch to the moon.
Okay, well, we're thinking of all those Star Trek fans this morning. Dr. Karl, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey there, Today fans. Sarah and...
What's my name again?
Oh my goodness, Karl.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel, though. Subscribe now for more news, special reports, and amazing Aussie stories.
And Karl misbehaving,
Whoa,
of course.
that never happens.
Always happens.
What's she talking about?